But I also have this larger question, and I think it's a really important one, and you know, that I put before you today, as well as, you know, the rest of the world, and that is, was January 6th worse than 9/11? I mean, just think about that for a minute, all right? We're debating whether or not to have a commission to investigate January 6th, like we investigated 9/11. We're having discussions of January 6th as if it was, on the one hand, some sort of major historic, this has never happened before, or the last time this happened was when Abe Lincoln was president, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you know, people like Congressman Clyde from Georgia saying, well, you couldn't have told the difference between what happened on January 6th and a normal tourist day. I mean, it was a normal tourist day. What are you all upset about? Come on. There is a 250 gigabyte leak of memos from inside the Washington, D.C. Metro Police Department that was obtained by a ransomware company. And they said, you know, pay the ransom or we're going to start releasing your private memos. Now, some of these private memos actually include the names and incident reports of individual police officers who have been accused of wrongdoing. So it's embarrassing to the Metro D.C. Police Department. But what's interesting is they've started releasing the documents. They started releasing the documents last week. And what's interesting is that there was this operation, this program that they were tracking, they and the FBI, and we're seeing a lot, I mean, these are not leaks from the FBI, but there are a lot of memos between the FBI and the D.C. Police Department around what they referred to as Popcorn Day. It was called, the program was actually by the people who were doing it, who were the white supremacists who were marching on the Capitol with the intent of murdering the vice president and the Speaker of the House and presumably any other member of Congress who got in their way. Those people had their own name for it. They called it Operation Stormbreaker. But the D.C. Metro Police were calling it Popcorn Day. Why? Because you will hear all kinds of pops all across America. If Operation Stormbreaker was successful, then, and this was, by the way, planned for January 19th, which is the day before Joe Biden is inaugurated president. It's the day before the peaceful transfer of power from Trump to Biden. That January 19th was supposed to, at least according to the files, not supposed to, but there's a very real possibility. Certainly, if the FBI had not gotten aggressive and started arresting people after January 6th, I think it probably would have happened. It was, well, this is from Jacob Shamsian at Insider.com. The plans, called Operation Stormbreaker, involved targeting landmarks, government buildings, power plants, and other civic institutions on January 19th. All across America, we would have explosions going off as a way of creating such a wild disruption across America that Donald Trump would have to remain president to deal with the crisis. This is from The Guardian, a piece by Jason Wilson. They also had a plan C. If Popcorn Day, if Operation Stormbreaker didn't work on January 19th, they had another plan for February. Quote, almost a month later, a bulletin reported that an unidentified militia group member in Texas was claiming that if their operation failed at the U.S. Capitol, there was a backup plan involving the group detonating bombs at the U.S. Capitol during the State of the Union. So, I mean, just take a look at what at what's going on here. Funded and supported by billionaire oligarchs in the U.S. and abroad, we have a movement here to turn America from a democratic republic into basically a white supremacist ethno-state oligarchy fronted by the GOP. And yeah, you know, I mean, just look at what they got away with, or what they've done so far. I mean, for centuries, first off, white cops have gotten away with routinely murdering unarmed black people and other minorities. Over 15 million people went into the streets to protest the police murder of George Floyd. And the white supremacist authoritarians in the Republican Party, made common cause with corrupt cops rather than trying to reform a corrupt system, number one. Number two, male white supremacists in Michigan nearly succeeded in kidnapping Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer so that she could face a show trial and public execution on TV, on the internet. They invaded and seized control of numerous state capitals. They did it here in Oregon. One of the Republican members has been charged with opening the door for them, letting them in. While the National Guard forces were held in abeyance, they've turned Facebook and social media into recruiting tools for violent white supremacist activity, and now they're reaching out to young people with their movement. They're spreading lies and doubts about the COVID vaccine to prevent Biden from getting control of COVID and thus getting control of the economy. The Capitol Police report. This is a report from last week from the Capitol Police. Quote, this year alone there has been a 107% increase in threats against members of Congress compared to 2020. And 2020 was no picnic. Donald Trump was whipping up political violence as much as he could in 2020. They're passing laws in state after state to forbid the teaching of the actual history of what America has done to minorities in this country for 400 years. Almost the entire Republican Party is publicly lying about January 6th and what led up to it, and promoting Trump's big lie that Biden didn't really win by 7 million votes. They're using that big lie, Trump's big lie, to actively rig the 2024 election. They're actively closing polling places in communities of color. If citizens in states don't like this, you have 3 states, Florida, Idaho, and South Dakota, that just in the last 2 weeks have passed laws saying you can't put stuff on the ballot anymore. You want to put a ballot initiative on that says that the votes actually get counted by professional vote counters rather than the state legislator deciding who won the election? You can't do that anymore. They've introduced 144 laws like this in 32 states. They've packed the Supreme Court. I lay this out in the hidden history in the Supreme Court book. I'm telling you, that's where it's at. So then we look back at 9/11 and what happened with 9/11 and how Iraq was an easy target and Bush. Well, without giving you the whole backstory, consider our response. I mean, our response to 9/11 was we spent over $1 trillion enhancing our security. We created new police agencies. We took Hitler's favorite term, Homeland, and started the Homeland, Securities, Office of Homeland Security. We unnecessarily declared war on 2 countries. Just to recap, 9/11 was an attempt by a guy who was seriously pissed off at the United States, Osama bin Laden, to hurt us. He was angry with us for 2 reasons, and he laid these out. He laid them out explicitly. Number one, back in 1991, George Herbert Walker Bush was president. He was looking at the next year, which was going to be the election year, so he was getting ready for the election. Bill Clinton was winning the primary, and he was like, okay, I need, to get my popularity numbers up because they weren't all that great. So let's do like Reagan and Thatcher did with Grenada and the Falklands, and let's have a little war, an easily won little war, a short war, a 2 or 3 day war. And that's exactly what he did in Iraq. Kuwait had been slant drilling underneath Iraq to steal their oil. Saddam Hussein was pissed off about it. He asked April Gillespie, the Bush's liaison from the State Department, if I attack Kuwait, are you guys going to have a problem? Bush, through her, basically said, no problem. He attacked Kuwait, and that was exactly what George Herbert Walker Bush needed. He had his 3-day war. He pushed the Iraq out of Kuwait and ended his war and said, okay, it's all good. And then he started the sanctions. Sanctions that lasted for decades and killed, just in the next 10 years, over 500,000 children, because one of the things they were sanctioning was chlorine. It could be made into poison gas, It's also used to purify tap water. Public water systems use chlorine. And that's why 500,000 children died from diarrheal diseases, from dysentery. So bin Laden was just trying to hurt us because he was upset that when Bush the elder invaded Iraq, he needed a local Air Force base to base that invasion out of, and the Saudis gave him a place called the Bin Sultan Air Force Base. Said, okay, here, this is yours. And we filled it full of Americans, and we used it to bomb the crap out of Iraq, and then we stayed there. And we were still there in 2001. And being a good Saudi, the Saudis take, you know, you think, you know, like Jerusalem is a holy site to Jews and Muslims, especially to Jews because it's, you know, it goes back. Saudi Arabia is the site for Islam, right? I mean, that's where Mecca and Medina are. And true believers, the Saudi true believers, believe that the entire country is sacred land. And so here, and bin Laden believed this, so here on this sacred land are American soldiers. The men are drinking alcohol, watching porn. The women are showing their elbows and knees and driving cars. Oh my God. Number one. And number two, bin Laden, and bin Laden warned us about this, by the way. And number two, bin Laden felt that we were basically stealing the oil from Saudi Arabia. This is what bin Laden wrote. It was published in the New York Times on February 23rd, 1998. The Arabian Peninsula has never, since God made it flat, created its desert, and encircled it with seas, been stormed by any forces like the Crusader armies spreading in it now like locusts, eating its riches and wiping out its plantations. For over 7 years since Bush's Iraq invasion, the United States has been occupying the lands of Islam in the holiest of places, the Arabian Peninsula, plundering its riches, dictating to its rulers, humiliating its people, terrorizing its neighbors, and turning its Air Force base in the peninsula into a spearhead through which to fight the neighboring Muslim people. That was bin Laden in 1998 telling us if we didn't pull out of Saudi Arabia, he was going to hit us. And that was the warning that Bill Clinton gave to George W. Bush, that Al Gore gave to Dick Cheney, and that Sandy Berger gave to Condoleezza Rice. Look out, he's coming. Bush, by the way, in 2003, April 2003, pulled all the American troops out of that Saudi Air Force base. About the same time, he stopped looking for bin Laden. Bin Laden turned out to be a family friend of the Bushes. That's a whole other story. This is not weird conspiracy stuff. You can easily look it up. And then, of course, Bush let the bin Laden family fly out of the U.S. with basically no checks and very little oversight. So we did this whole huge thing, right? Bush and Cheney added $7 trillion to our national debt for their two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, both absolutely unnecessary. Afghanistan had offered to arrest bin Laden for us. Bush said no. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Arguably, Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. It was all Saudis flying those players. 17 of them were Saudis. But the Saudis were good buddies with the Bush family, so and with America. So that ain't happening. I think that 6/1 or 1/6, January 6th, I think January 6th was more destructive and more dangerous to the United States than 9/11. It was an actual attempt to take down democracy. Bin Laden, in his wildest dreams, never thought he could end democracy in America.